So we are looking at problems in Chapter 9-3 and the t-test. So our first problem is number 18. The Fair Isaac Corporation, FICO, credit score is used by banks and other lenders to determine whether someone is a good credit risk. Scores range from 300 to 850, with a score of 720 or more, indicating that a person is a very good credit risk. An economist wants to determine whether a mean FICO score is lower than the cutoff of 720. She finds that a random sample of 100 people that had a mean FICO score of 730 with a sample standard deviation of 92. Can the economist conclude that the mean FICO score is less than 720? Use alpha at 0.05. So we get some preliminary information. One is we know that x bar is equal to 703 and sx is equal to 92. And we know that alpha is equal to 0.05. And finally, n is equal to 100. So we need these pieces of information along with mu naught to do our next step, which is the test statistic. So in this test statistic, we know that we have the value t is equal to x bar minus mu naught divided by the standard deviation of the sample divided by the square root of n. And so in this particular case, we will substitute the values in from here into our calculation. When we do that, we have a value t is equal to 703 minus 720 divided by 92 divided by the square root of 100. And so that's our standard error, 92 divided by the square root of 100. So now we can do some calculations. T now is equal to a negative 17 over 9.2 when we do our calculations. And this is equal to a negative number, a negative 1.848 approximately. This is an approximation. And so the next step is to evaluate in our curve for degrees of freedom. Our degrees of freedom in this case is equal to 99, but if we went to the table, we know that under the t-distribution, we'll have to use about 100. And so in this case, here's 0. Here's t is at negative 1.848, and now we're trying to find this value here. So our p-value, when we look up on table A3, we see that we can't find the exact value, but we can find in-between value. And we find that the p-value is between 0.05 is our p-value, less than 0.025. And with technology, right, if we use the t-test on our calculator, we can find the exact p-value. The p-value with technology is equal to 0.0338. Well, since our p-value, right, since p-value is less than 5%, we reject H naught, and we say that based on this sample, at 5% significance level, the mean FICO score is less than 720. In our second example, we see we have data. Again, this is going to be a t-test, primarily because we don't know the population standard deviation. So this is number 27 in our chapter. And here it says, when testing a new drug, scientists measured the amount of active ingredient that is absorbed by the body. In a study done at the Colorado School of Mines, a new fungal medication that was designed to be applied to the skin was tested. The medication was applied to the skin of 8 adults. 1 hour later, the amount of active ingredients absorbed into the skin was measured and outlined in the following table. So again, we would put this information, the 8 different observations, into our calculator. And since n is less than 30, we need to check to see if the sample is approximately normal. So we do a box plot, and we see that in fact we don't have any outliers. There doesn't look like a major skewing effect. So we perform the hypothesis to determine whether the mean amount absorbed is less than 3 micrograms. And we use alpha at 0.05. So here is the hypothesis test. The hypothesis test is H naught is mu is equal to 3 micrograms, and H1 is mu is less than 3 micrograms. We have an X bar that is equal to 2.531, and we have an Sx is equal to 0.917. N, of course, is equal to 8, and our degrees of freedom is equal to approximately 7. So here is our primary information to do the test. We do know that the test statistic T is equal to X bar minus mu naught divided by Sx divided by the square root of n. And of course we can start putting the information here into T. So we have T is equal to 2.531 minus 3 divided by 0.917 divided by the square root of 8. And when we do this calculation, we get T is equal to a negative 1.448. Now, if we're doing it with the table to find the p-value, we go to table A3, and we find that the p-value is between 0.01 and it's between 0.05, right? If we use technology, in other words, we do we actually use the TI-84, we find that the p-value is approximately equal to 0.0956. Well, our decision is do not reject H naught at the 5% level of significance. Right? So essentially there's no evidence to conclude that the micrograms, the 3 micrograms, is less than 3 micrograms with this current drug that's being tested. And so we have no evidence. Well, that concludes our problem set for Chapter 9-3.